All right, thank you all. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I'm going to start my presentation by reading two poems from the books that you all read. And While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel is a very interesting, moving book of poetry and artwork compiled and edited by Ahmed Badr. The title itself is so interesting and fitting because it was taken from a well-known Lebanese American poet, Khalil Gibran. And Khalil Gibran himself came from a long tradition of poetry in the Middle East. You can find people before him like Jalal ad-Rumi, like Hafiz, like Omar Khayyam, and so many of them. Even in the current time, there are so many profound writers from that region. The first poem that I would like to read from Ahmed Badr's book is entitled Darkness and Light. Keep hiding, my parents say, as we escape the light of death. Every day, walking along roads, not knowing what to expect. Mixed feelings, mixed weather, always hoping for the best. The lights that destroyed the feeling of safety in the room of your death. Memories fading, pain growing, but I'm still hearing the sound of your laugh. Seeing the light take you away, I always wondered why. Why do you follow us wherever we go? Syria, Jordan, here. I saw your shadow next to the tree. I hope that we could connect. I wanted to tell you how I hated the light for taking you away from us, but also I am stronger than that. You are stronger than that. We are stronger than that. The next one is entitled Do Not. Do not define us by our tragedy, our pain, our sorrow, our people, our flags. Define us by our souls, stories, the distance between our truth and yours. I find this beautiful poem to be simple but also complex. Based on the poem's context, the poet's words such as tragedy, pain, sorrow, and flux indicate certain conditions or things that happened or belonged to others outside of ourselves. The poem features the words us and you, standing face to face in a given emotional distance. The poet appears bothered by the distance reflected in the juxtapositions of words. Tragedy as a word or pain as a word could have had a shared experiences except for the presence of the word our. Our pain is specific to us until it becomes yours. Our pain lends itself to a sympathetic, empathetic, or judgmental reaction until a standard is set for measuring its depth. The poet invites us to examine the internal, the soul, which is more universal than the flags. When the distance between our truth and yours is measured, it becomes pluralistic, not singular. Measuring the soul is an elemental imagination that doesn't leave too much of a void between the needs of ours and yours. The poet demands that our souls and stories should measure us. In the poem, there is a sense of firmness that stands against the perception of otherness. And the young refugee poet gives us the right yardstick to measure their humanity. In the same way, in Darkness and Light, a young Syrian poet, Fida, struggles with loss, nostalgia, insecurity, destruction, lack of belongingness, uncertainty, and regrets. Her wonder and regrets reveal the strong dedication the deceased relative had to the family. And the poet questions, "Seeing the light take you away, I always wondered why. Why do you follow us wherever we go? Syria, Jordan, here." Her questions are not doubts, but astonishments of the incredible love of the deceased that the writer wants to preserve. Although the poet struggles with feelings of helplessness, despair, and loss, she stands firm against them by valuing the power of memory more than the impact of the light of death. Erasing the differences between the living and the dead, and giving her beloved deceased relative immortality status, she addresses her beloved in the present. She concludes her poems with the following lines. "I wanted to tell you how I hated the light for taking you away from us, but also I am stronger than that. You are stronger than that. We are stronger than that." Fida's poem is the meaning of being measured by our stories, not by our tragedy. We all have our struggles, whether collective or personal. A struggle is a state of mind that cannot be quantified or compared to anything else but its own. The chemistry of water remains the same whether it is bucketful or glassful. If we agree to this idea, let the decision we make to overcome our challenges and any wisdom we acquire through that journey be our measurements. I have my own story of passing through difficult situations. I relate to Ahmed Badr's book, which compiles poems and artworks. Like most of the authors included in the book, I was a teenager when I left home during the war between Ethiopia and Somalia in the late 1970s. Home was Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia. I was a city girl, a student at the Fine Arts School of Addis Ababa, an institution which trained high school students in the fine arts. Growing up, I was exposed to the theater, music, poetry, and art of Ethiopians of that generation who were bringing European and American modernism with the flavor of homegrown knowledge. The playwright and poet laureate Tsaggaye Gebremetin, Ethiopian, translated Shakespeare's masterworks such as Hamlet, Othello, and also the German theater practitioner Bertolt Brecht's Mother Courage, among others, with incredible adaptations that made us believe the characters were Ethiopians. Also, I grew up during the Ethiopian Revolution after Emperor Haile Selassie was overthrown and a military dictatorship took power. The revolution, anticipated to bring a positive change, took a different turn. The country was divided between supporters and enemies of the regime. Ethiopia was in turmoil. The military dictatorship was brutal in its ruling, trying to eliminate all the opposition parties and individuals who opposed the military junta. The mass murder and mass grave, tortures and imprisonments became the sign of that era under the particular oppression of the government infamously known as the Red Terror. I was part of the student movement that opposed the dictatorship and became blacklisted. Because of that, I had to leave my own hometown, Addis Ababa, the capital city, with students like me who were blacklisted. We aimed to go to the neighboring country, Djibouti, to contact the UNHCR offices there. However, on our way to Djibouti, we were captured by Somali forces who were advancing to the Ethiopian border because of the Ogaden War that took place in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Then we were imprisoned in a labor camp in Somalia for 10 years. It was in those concentration camps, particularly in a labor camp called Hawaii, that I wrote the collection of poems for my first book, Yet Now. And the poems were written on peelings of medicine packages in hiding. Writing and reading were prohibited in the camp. I hid my poems in poorly covered thatched roofs and would lose many of them to rats. Smuggled out of the labor camp through the intervention of International Red Cross, the book was published soon after my repatriation in 1990, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. While in the concentration camp, hidden from view, I read smuggled books such as Alex Haley's Roots, Survival in Auschwitz by Primo Levi, and A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Here in 1982, in Somalia, East Africa, in a small place called Hawaii, in a concentration camp hidden from the rest of the world, I read stories that happened a half a century ago or longer, oceans apart, yet connected by a common thread, a human condition that transcends time and place. After my release, joining Howard University in Washington, D.C., as an undergraduate student, it became natural for me or for my work to be inspired by any humanitarian issues globally, other than my own experience, that is. Passing through different phases, aesthetic-wise, I always questioned whether it is possible to express tragic situations beautifully, because as you all know, fine arts deals with beauty. Can I do justice to the case if my paintings are not shocking enough to reflect the inhumanity of the act upon which they would comment? My Master's of Fine Arts thesis, Humanity in Decent Visual Images of Human Suffering, gives an insight into my 10 years of imprisonment as a teenager in Somalia's concentration camps. It also references how my experience relates to the global crisis of humanity. I created a substantial body of work about the Red Terror in Ethiopia, the issue of Native Americans, conflicts in the Middle East, slavery, the Holocaust, and other genocides such as in Rwanda. Most of these pieces were exhibited in institutions such as the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and many others. My painting, The River in Rwanda, is permanently displayed at the Holocaust Museum in Skokie, Illinois. All right. I would like to read some poems before we go to the artwork. Poems that I wrote. I will read the recent ones. Previously, when I was in concentration camps, I used to write only in Amharic. Here, mostly I write in Amharic, that's my native language. But from time to time, I also write in English. I also, tell my audience, my poetry have or has some kind of identity to it. It feels like me. I have accent when I speak in English, and my poems will have accents as well. The first poem that I would like to read is called Cotton Life. I wrote Cotton Life in Amharic first, the one that you see on the right-hand side. I wrote it in Uganda in 2017 when I went to Uganda to do a research on refugee settlement programs there. The reason for my going, by the way, I got the QCC's grant to go there and do the research. The reason was I was working on a series of paintings focusing on Mediterranean refugee crisis. And I always hear, questions and comments from so many people wondering why African refugees take risks going to the Mediterranean Sea, and most of them, lose their lives. They were commenting, knowing the fact that there were, still are, some refugee settlement programs in Africa. So I wanted to find out, what's happening there. Why are African refugees going to trying to go to Europe, taking risk in the Mediterranean? So I went there. I visited 2 different camps, interviewed many people. The condition was extremely dire, and there were people staying in that camp for almost 20 years or so. So Cotton Life was written while I was in there. And this is a translation. The British poet Chris Bucket and myself translated this poem. Cotton Life. This era of exile winds its spindle of raw cotton before the seed is removed and life bursts out. Before the cotton is combed, before it is robbed and made into thread, before it's woven into cloth, before its pattern is decided and its colors applied, before it's given a name, before it's worn as a garment, before it's put on as a cloak, before it is blessed, this age of exile spins without uncoiling, tangles without threading, and before its cotton life begins, it announces its end. The second one was written in 2018 when ex-President Trump decided to separate children from their parents at U.S.-Mexico border. It was a very, instant reflection and reaction to that decision. And I wrote this one in English initially, then I translated it into Amharic. To the parent of a caged child, US-Mexico border. Keep the numbers they gave you, if it is valid, to reclaim your child, like a backpack, a stuff, an item, a contraband, you handed in by the entrance of a jailhouse. Pray your toddler is tagged properly. You may not recognize the bed if you see the light again illuminating the flower. No more tears for your child. The well of sorrow is full, enough for all the victims to come. Stand still. Your back is free, your burden loaded into your heart. Hold your love tight, the mighty power that reaches across the wire cages, across boundaries, anywhere fertile, skipping the dry spots devoid of humanity. I'm going to skip this one because we're going to hear the audio in the slides. And this will be the last one. I had a great mentor in Washington, D.C., who passed away recently, a very internationally recognized African-American painter, Sam Gilliam. He would, from time to time, whenever I see him, in the middle of our conversation, he would ask, how did you survive anyway? So he was not looking for any kind of answer, but it was a kind of feeling that he projects thinking about my past. So at one time I decided to write a poem in English for him. And it says, you ask how I survived. I survived. As a baby fly might survive the fall, as a blown petal might survive the wind, as a young frog might survive the mud, as a young cricket might survive a miss of a tender lip, no more, no less, I survived because I stepped on my own steps and missed. Yeah, thank you. Right, now we're going to see some of the artworks I have been doing. These ones are selected for the theme, the subjects that we are exploring, because I do other things as well. By the way, this is me when I left Addis Ababa. It was at this age that I was imprisoned. This one is Part of the Lord, the title. It's currently displayed at American Embassy in Ethiopia. So it's on a permanent display, and they collected it 15 years ago. And Part of the Lord is inspired by a poem by Jalaluddin Rumi, the 12th century Sufist. And he has a poem by the same title, Part of the Lord. And materially, this is a very unconventional materials that I used. I passed through so many conventional processes, going through undergraduate school, then graduate school, then as a career person, as an artist. So experimental pieces are these ones, translucency and coloration, folding and unfolding spaces characterize the kind of artworks that I started working 20 years ago. One of my recent works are compiled in here. I had a solo show at American University Museum in Washington, D.C., and I did part of that exhibit component with a poet, American poet called Ethopia Miller. So we exchanged poems. For instance, he might see an artwork that I did for the show. He would write a poem about it, and I would respond to the poem in two ways, by writing another poem and also by creating artwork. So you're going to hear one of his poems submitted for the show.
We were born somewhere between heartbreak and desire, the place we fled before the crying. The blue years, when we had no food or water. The blue years, when many were strangled by the air. So much thirst, too much blueness on our tongues.
The second one is in Amharic. If you have time, I would show you. We will listen, to Amharic version of my poem, responding to his poem. But let's go to the English first. Blindfold for the refugees. Covered with gray dust, I fall into the deep blue ashes. My eyes smeared with navy coal, blindfolded by grief. I wrap my indigo-dyed hair with a piece of cloth cut from the garment of the Tuareg, the blue people. I step on the land of the Bedouin, wrinkles of time on it, gray cracks of the earth under my bare feet, inked with dark maroon, encrypt my future. I trace the fault lines like braille. Toasted lavash brushes my nose. A cape crow crosses my face. I cross the land on my way to the sea to plead with the gods of the Mediterranean. I stand in front of the angry sea. Before I step on the boat, before it capsizes, I brush off the last sand from my sore feet. I inhale the cerulean sledge-like air, the seafloor flat under my head. Inward, I see a sledge of sapphire seeps into my bone marrow, into the stream of my blood that turned cobalt, since the village behind me flattened into ashes, the people into crystal salt, like Lot's wife, for re-examining just once. Kebedech Tekleab. Part of the Lord with its full composition. And this is another mesh piece that I dedicated to my mentor and professor. And this one is called Strange Fruits, and you might recall a song by Billie Holiday. This is about the 1915 lynching here in America. And I was inspired not by the Billie Holiday's version. I like it so much, but I happened to be listening to Cassandra Wilson's version, and that actually evoked a certain kind of emotion, and the title is Strange Fruit. I have a very good relationship with a jazz composer and musician, James Newton, who is still, alive, working in California. And his recent album has this interesting title and excellent composition. The title is As the Sound of Many Waters, and this piece is inspired by his music. One of the earliest pieces, 1993, this is part of my thesis, and it is semi-abstract. Degradation is the title, with the same theme. Shackled is another one, 1993, acrylic on canvas. These works are big in size. It's 6 inches by 56 inches. This one is another one, The Living and the Dead, 1994, when I was a graduate school. In 2009, I created this piece twice. Behind the Bars is the title. This is a smaller piece, 26 by 26 inches. The river in Rwanda, the one that I mentioned earlier, which is permanently displayed at the Holocaust Museum in Skokie. And I started working on the artwork the same day the genocide began in Rwanda in 1994. Powwow series is part of the African American influence. I had a chance to go to North Dakota, and I visited the elders, and I stayed in the elders' medicine man's house for 3 days. And I went to exhibit my art at North Dakota State University, but it became more than that. And during after my visit, I started working on series of paintings under the Powwow series, and this is one of them, big painting. The title is Serenity for this one, inspired by the inclusiveness of the Native American prayer, because I was invited to participate in a sweat lodge, and generously they made the prayers in English so that I could listen. And I was completely moved how inclusive the prayer was. And this is again another one from that series, the philosophy of Native Americans, man, nature, the agreeable, living condition in this earth, inspired this piece. It's called Integration. I watched the film Schindler's List 3 times, and it is such a heavy film. Those of you who watch that film, but since I deal with subjects like that, I had to force myself to see it 3 times, and this is one of the pieces I did, and I worked in series black and white for the obvious reason, that you could understand, and this is one of them in 1994. A-Day is a name given to the Iraq and America war operation. Artillery Day is the full name. And I was working on the piece since the news of the imminent war, was everywhere, around the world. So the last splashes, the last touches were done in my studio, just listening to the radio and the shelling, etc. This is a big piece, 10 feet by 4 feet. It was created in 2003. As I mentioned earlier, I went to Uganda to examine the refugee settlement program. 2 places, Bidibidi and Nakivali, gave me the whole information, amongst many other settlements, actually. They were run by the same institution. And returning back, I started working on big-scale materials. This was created in 2018. The title is Non-Buoyant Life Vest. And this quotation actually inspired the piece, mainly, among other things. Trickled into death, 150,000 migrants' life jackets, many of which are useless fakes, lie piled on the coast of Lesbos in grim memorial to those who died crossing the Mediterranean. So this was documented in 2017, almost at the time that I went to Uganda to work on the Mediterranean crisis. Here is the first big piece that I created. These are some details because it's a huge piece and hard to understand the scale. This is me next to the artworks, just to show, how big the scale is. And crossing the borders, acrylic on mesh is another piece that I did almost for 3 years between 2018 and 2023. Has something to do again with the ordeal of traveling and crossing borders. The poems that you heard earlier from E. Ethelbert Miller inspired this painting as well, in addition to the poem I wrote. And the title is Too Much Blueness on Our Tongues, and it was taken from Ethelbert's poetry. The Lost Words is a series of paintings I did thinking about identity and how refugees actually lose their identity when they cross or when they migrate to a different country. So it's a large piece just to show you the details, very textural. And symbolically, I used two scripts together just to make a statement about the confusion, the migrants would have not being understood or not understanding anything and losing their identities. So I used the Ethiopian script Ge'ez in addition to the English, alphabet together. This is the detail of it. I'll be finished. I'll be done, shortly. And the Lost Words, I did it in so many different formats. This is a print material, and again, another piece with the prints that are textural and colorful. This is a big installation. This is another one created in 2019 and exhibited here at Columbia University and many other places, museums, etc. Another side of it, another side of the future unfolding. It has something to do with the poem I read for the caged child, and just sample of the American University exhibit that combines poetry and artwork together. This is it. Thank you so much.